New York. A cold night. The city never sleeps. Neon lights reflect off the wet pavement, creating blurred streaks like watercolor paintings splashed with water. Skyscrapers shimmer. Sleek limousines glide through the night, carrying the powerful to lavish parties. On the streets leading into the heart of Manhattan, amidst the hurried crowd, a lone figure walks, Johnny Depp. A worn leather coat drapes over his lean frame. Faded boots leave their imprint on the damp ground. The cold wind slips through the gray scarf wrapped around his neck, carrying a hint of nostalgia. He is not here for the spotlight. He does not seek applause. He has come for something else. A silver ring, once belonging to Robert Johnson. The blues legend, the man who entered folklore with the tale of selling his soul to the devil in exchange for talent. That ring is set to be auctioned tonight at Henderson's House of Rarity, one of the most prestigious auction houses in the world. But Johnny knows this is not a place for him. Henderson's is not just an auction house. It is a place where power is flaunted, where money determines a person's worth. He stops in front of the building, the heavy dark wooden doors, the polished brass handles reflecting the glow of the streetlights. Before stepping inside, he looks up at the sky. There are no stars, a starless night, perhaps an omen. But Johnny does not care. He pushes the door open. The real battle has just begun. Johnny steps into the world of opulence. The wooden doors close behind him. Instantly, the atmosphere changes. If outside New York is a city of chaos, inside Henderson's is an entirely different world. Orderly, powerful, and lavish. Antique paintings framed in gold hang along the corridor. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft golden glow, reflecting off the polished marble floors. Velvet-covered chairs, ornate display tables. Every item here is part of a world that only a select few have the privilege to touch. Johnny walks, feeling the glances trailing him. No one recognizes him, or if they do not care. They do not believe that someone like Johnny Depp could exist in their world. From across the grand room, a man watches. Mark Dawson, the manager of Henderson's auction house. Mark does not like people like Johnny. He knows who Johnny is, but in his eyes, fame holds no value compared to wealth. He observes Johnny, smirks slightly, a misfit among a sea of luxury suits. He does not know why Johnny is here, but he is sure of one thing. He will not let Johnny leave without humiliation, the condescending glances. Inside the main hall, the air is thick with polite laughter. Champagne glasses are raised, conversations laced with veiled arrogance among the powerful. Johnny walks slowly past the displays, luxurious items, priceless paintings, antique watches, dazzling diamonds encased in pristine glass boxes. But there is only one thing he cares about, the silver ring of Robert Johnson. A group of businessmen stands nearby, engaged in quiet conversation. As Johnny passes, their voices lower. They glance at him, smirking. One man chuckles. Does he really think he can buy that? Another takes a sip of his drink. Maybe he's just here to escape the cold. A woman shakes her head. Perhaps he just wants attention. Ridiculous. Johnny does not need to hear them to know what they are saying. This world is not for those who do not wear tailored suits. Across the room, another person is watching him. Lisa Montgomery, Mark Dawson's assistant. Unlike Mark, she does not enjoy power games. She does not approve of how people here judge others solely by appearance. She sees Johnny being mocked. She feels uneasy, but she does not dare to speak. In this world, standing against the powerful means destroying your own future. So she remains silent. Like everyone else, Johnny wants to buy it, but he is dismissed. Finally, Johnny stops in front of the silver ring of Robert Johnson, encased in a simple glass box. But to Johnny, it shines brighter than any diamond in this room. He stares at it. This is not just a piece of jewelry. It is a fragment of history. A cold voice speaks behind him. Do you think you can buy it? Johnny turns around. Mark Dawson stands there, hands in his pockets, eyes sharp. Mark smirks. This ring is very expensive. Not just anyone can afford it. Johnny does not respond immediately. He looks at Mark, then back at the ring. I don't care about the price. I care about the value. Mark scoffs. Value? Here, everything has a price. and the value of an item depends on who owns it. He glances at Johnny from head to toe. And to be honest, I don't think this ring suits you. A silent battle begins. The silent battle, when money determines a person's worth. The air inside the auction hall grew heavy. Johnny remained still, standing before the silver ring. His eyes were locked onto it, as if all the noise around him had faded into nothingness. Mark Dawson crossed his arms, a smirk still lingering on his lips. The auction was about to begin, and he was certain of one thing. Johnny would not win in this world. The wooden gavel was raised. Mark slowly stepped onto the podium, facing the crowd. He flashed a friendly smile, yet there was a hint of provocation in his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we present a truly special item, a relic of Robert Johnson, a symbol of blues and legend. He paused briefly, glancing at Johnny before continuing. An item that only those who truly understand its value will be able to own. A few soft chuckles rippled through the room. He did not say it outright, but everyone knew. He was aiming at Johnny. Johnny remained silent. Mark looked toward the hall. Let's begin the auction. The starting bid, $50,000. A middle-aged man in a gray suit raised his hand. $100,000. Mark nodded approvingly. But then, a deep voice resonated through the hall. $150,000. The entire room fell silent. Several heads turned. Johnny Depp. A faint smile appeared on Mark's lips. He had not expected Johnny to bid. He raised an eyebrow. $200,000. Johnny showed no surprise. He calmly responded. $300,000. The atmosphere stiffened. Some began to take interest. A man in a worn leather coat, faded boots, a man playing a game that only the wealthiest dared to engage in. Mark gritted his teeth. He could not let Johnny win. He had a plan. He leaned toward a businessman in the front row and whispered a few words. The man smirked. Immediately, a voice from the far side of the room called out, $500,000. Johnny met Mark's gaze. He knew this was no ordinary game, but he would not back down. $600,000. The entire hall went silent. Mark clenched his fists. He could not let Johnny win. No way. $1 million. Murmurs erupted throughout the room, an outrageous amount. Johnny remained composed. He stepped forward, his voice unwavering. $2 million. No one spoke. No one dared to bid any further. The gavel struck down. Mark could not believe his ears. Johnny had won, but Mark was not done yet. The outrage of the elite, when an outsider disrupts the order. There was no applause, no congratulations. Johnny had won the auction, but his victory was not welcomed. No one wanted to see someone like him disrupt the rules of their world. Mark stepped forward. His expression remained composed, yet beneath it, anger simmered. He looked at Johnny and smirked. Congratulations, Mr. Departamento. However, as per our policy, we will need to verify your financial standing before finalizing the transaction. Johnny said nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a black card. He placed it on the table. Mark's expression faltered for a moment. He had no reason to deny the transaction now. A man in the audience took a sip of his drink and shook his head. $2 million for a silver ring? Ridiculous. A woman nearby smirked. I wonder if he truly understands its value, or if he's just trying to get attention. Johnny did not react. He did not need to explain himself to anyone. He picked up the silver ring, holding it in his palm. It was small, but it carried a piece of history. Mark clenched his jaw. He could not accept this. He could not let Johnny walk away so easily. A dark conspiracy, when a man of power refuses to lose. Johnny stepped out of Henderson's, feeling the chill of the New York night. He knew this was not over. Suddenly, a voice called from behind, "Mr. Depp!" Johnny stopped. In front of him, 3 men in black suits stood blocking his way. One of them stepped forward. "Mr. Mark Dawson would like to have a word with you." Johnny smirked. If he has something to say, he can come here himself. The man did not respond. The other 2 took a step closer, flanking Johnny. He sighed. This old game again. Mark stood on the steps of Henderson's, watching from above. A triumphant smile played on his lips. "You think this is over, Johnny?" He descended slowly, his gaze cold and piercing. "You may have won an auction, But you won't win this game. Johnny met his eyes. I'm not playing your game. Mark chuckled. You still don't get it, do you? This world has its rules, and you broke them. He stepped even closer, lowering his voice. Did you really think you could just walk away with that ring? Johnny remained silent. Mark's eyes flickered toward the silver ring in Johnny's hand. That ring does not belong to you, and I will make sure it never will. Johnny knew this was far from over. This was no longer just an auction. This was war. Recognition. When Johnny is no longer an outsider, but still faces opposition. New York at night remained as loud as ever. But for Johnny Depp, everything seemed to slow down. He clenched the silver ring tightly in his hand. It was cold, yet carried an invisible weight. This was not just an auction item. This was a piece of history. Mark Dawson still stood there, on the steps of Henderson's. He watched Johnny as if he had just trespassed into forbidden territory. He could do nothing at the moment, but Johnny knew the real battle was far from over. Johnny stepped onto the street. His worn leather boots made a soft impact against the tiled pavement, reflecting the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. He was in no hurry. He wanted to take in this moment. Then a voice called from behind. Mr. Depp. Johnny turned around. James Whitmore, a wealthy businessman, a true collector, a man who valued meaning over money. James slowly approached, his gaze curious, but without the disdain others had shown. You truly understand the value of that ring, don't you? Johnny looked straight into James's eyes. No need for words. His expression said it all. James nodded slightly. I've never seen anyone in that room who actually cared about the meaning of the items they buy. But you're different. Johnny didn't respond, just smiled faintly. James chuckled. You made a lot of people uncomfortable tonight, but some of them are starting to see you in a new light. From another corner of the street, Lisa Montgomery, Mark's assistant, remained near the entrance. She had witnessed everything. She had seen the look in Mark's eyes when Johnny won the auction, the restrained fury behind his forced smile. She knew Mark was not the kind of man to accept defeat easily. Lisa sighed, watching Johnny walk away. You have no idea who you just challenged. The contrast between two worlds. When a hidden power begins to move, the same night, another battle was beginning. Inside his private office at Henderson's, Mark Dawson sat at his desk. The glow from his desk lamp reflected against the red wine in his glass. He was not going to let this end so simply. Johnny Depp had won the auction, but Mark would not allow that to become a true victory. Mark picked up his phone. He called someone. At the same time, Johnny was leaving Henderson's. He knew he had stepped into another world, a place where power was not simply about money. James Whitmore walked beside him. Do you realize you just broke the order? Johnny chuckled softly. They're just making things complicated for themselves. James looked at Johnny. You made them feel threatened. Johnny stopped walking. He looked at James. A silver ring can threaten them? James took a sip of his drink. Not the ring, the way you won. In the dark office, Mark Dawson set down his phone. He had just initiated a campaign against Johnny Depp. Not loud, not public, but it would be a devastating blow. The game had only just begun. The ripple effect, when the story reaches its peak. The next morning, social media exploded. A post from an employee at Henderson's began to spread like wildfire. I have never seen anyone treated like this at an auction. A wealthy man who did not flaunt his status. A man who stepped into that place not for attention, but for something of real value. The post was written by Oliver Grant, an auction staff member who had witnessed everything. The post spread rapidly. Millions of people began commenting. They condemned Henderson's for its discrimination. They praised Johnny for challenging the system. Inside Mark Dawson's office, his eyes were glued to his phone screen. His expression was unreadable. The post was causing an uproar. He knew it, but he had prepared for this. Mark took a slow sip of wine. If Johnny Depp thought he could win just because of public support, he was wrong. He picked up his phone. He made another call. Start the second phase, the climax and the turning point, when the battle goes beyond an auction. The following morning, social media was still in turmoil. The post from an employee at Henderson's continued to spread. I have never seen anyone treated like this at an auction. A man who did not flaunt his status, who did not try to make a scene, who entered that place not for money, but for something that held true meaning. The post was written by Oliver Grant, an auction staff member who had seen everything. The post went viral. Millions of people commented, shared. The entire world began talking. They criticized Henderson's for its bias. They praised Johnny for disrupting the system. Inside Mark Dawson's office, he stared at his phone screen. His face remained expressionless. A simple post, but it had started a storm. But Mark was not worried. He had been prepared for this. He picked up his phone. He made a call. Start the second phase. That afternoon, the media received an official statement from Henderson's. Mark Dawson held a press conference. He appeared in front of a sea of cameras, wearing a confident expression. Stepping onto the podium, he looked directly into the lens. There is no discrimination at Henderson's. We have always welcomed those who truly appreciate art. He paused. A faint trace of mockery flickered in his cold gaze. However, some individuals may have taken advantage of this event to draw attention to themselves. We are not making any accusations, but Henderson's will always protect its reputation. A simple statement, but it carried a sharp implication. He did not explicitly name Johnny as someone exploiting the media, but everyone understood. He was targeting Johnny. Immediately after the press conference, another figure appeared on television, James Whitmore. He looked directly at the camera. His voice was calm and unwavering. I was there at Henderson's that night, and I can say one thing. Johnny Depp is someone who truly understands the value of that ring. He did not buy it to flaunt his wealth. He did not buy it for show. He bought it because he understood its meaning. His words spread rapidly. The public began to shift. People started speaking out in Johnny's defense. Lisa Montgomery, Mark Dawson's assistant, she could no longer remain silent. She sent an anonymous email to the press, revealing that Mark had deliberately manipulated the auction. Henderson's faced immense pressure. Mark Dawson was forced into a corner. In the end, he had no choice but to resign. Johnny still had the ring, but his real victory was not the silver band in his hand. It was the way he made the world question the true value of a person. Lessons learned from the story. True value is not in appearances, but in how one appreciates the things around them. Johnny was underestimated simply because he did not appear as polished as the others in the auction hall. But he was the only one who truly understood the value of that ring. Lesson: never judge a person by their appearance. The elite do not like being challenged. Henderson's was a world, a place where money and power dictated everything. Johnny did not just win an auction, he challenged the system, and that made them furious. Lesson: if you challenge the system, be prepared to face the consequences. When an ordinary person stands against power, they need allies. Without James Whitmore standing beside Johnny, or Lisa Montgomery exposing the truth, Johnny could have been taken down. Lesson: justice cannot win without those who dare to stand up. The media can change everything. Without Oliver Grant's post, this story might have been forgotten. Social media became a powerful tool. It helped Johnny regain the recognition he deserved. Lesson: in today's world, one story can change an entire system. Justice may come late, but it will come. Mark Dawson thought he could manipulate everything, but in the end, he had to face the consequences. Lesson: the truth may be hidden for a while, but it can never be buried forever. Johnny Depp won an auction, but his greatest victory was not the silver ring. It was his victory over a system that wanted to control everything. Henderson's will still exist. The elite will continue to shape society, but Johnny's story has become a warning.